Captain Nymira Estrella Jones shouted orders as the enemy ship drew closer, ready to strike. The crew obeyed without hesitation. Even as newly captained as the starship Echo was, its crew knew a trustworthy leader when they saw one. "Get those weapons fully charged!" Nymira heard a "yes, ma'am" as she turned toward the ship in front of her. If the massive oval with a wavy line cutting vertically through it was any indication, their enemy was a Phaean ship. Those bastards. Nymira had no clue how they had found out about their mission to the Centauri Nebula, but here they were, nonetheless. "Weapons ready," Ensign Johnson stated from her right. Nymira nodded as she waited for the Phaean battlecruiser to inch closer. It fired. The shot hit its mark. Alarms blared as the bridge turned red. Nymira gritted her teeth, doing her best to concentrate through the blaring noise and her growing headache. "Ensign Johnson, damage report," Nymira ordered. "The outer hull sustained damage. The Phaean ship did not damage any major systems," Ensign Johnson replied while looking at various screens on the console before him. "Is the camouflage still operational?" Nymira inquired, calculating her next action. The ensign again looked down at the screens before replying, "Yes, ma'am." The Phaean ship fired again, and more alarms blared. Nymira steadied her crew, raising her hand in a motion to wait. They had to wait for the correct timing. The tension on the bridge grew almost palpable as the crew waited for word from their captain. Nymira held her breath as she anticipated the Phaean ship's next move. It crept closer and closer. There was a silence as the seconds ticked by, seemingly made longer with the weight of the impending order. "Now!" Nymira finally shouted. Suddenly their ship veered downward. Their weapons remained upward, shooting into the Phaean ship as their camouflage activated. The weapons went silent, and they disappeared into the black abyss of space. "Check the sensors to see if they're following us," she ordered, releasing the tension from her shoulders. Commander Ruio Huron, a Lunan and Nymira's first officer, looked at the various instruments in front of her. Her incandescent pearl-white skin shimmered under the fluorescent lighting. "It looks like the Phaean's main engine was damaged. They will not be following us for some time." "Good," Nymira replied. As Nymira's shift went by, she thought about her mission objectives. The only reason the Echo, newly captained as it was allowed to venture in this direction toward the Centauri Nebula was due to its size. It was nearly untraceable. It held a crew of 375 and was equipped with technology that prevented any signal from being heard by unwanted ears. Outgoing calls had to be approved by the captain and encrypted. The mission statement itself had been very vague, which was odd, but Nymira accepted the mission anyway. She had not been allowed to tell her family where she was going, which was also strange. They were headed in a direction no Earth ship had ever been allowed to go. Explore the nebula and report your findings. That was it. That was the mission objective. Explore? No ship had done that since the Phaeans increased their patrols around Earth's solar system. Nymira had pushed back against the order, only to be met with an ultimatum from her superiors. Go on this mission and receive the promotion she'd been working toward, or stay where she was, indefinitely. She had chosen to accept the mission. She still had her reservations, but she trusted those above her had their reasons for maintaining their secrecy. Excusing herself from the bridge, Nymira exited, hearing the doors swoosh shut behind her. As she entered the room, Nymira scanned the small space. It consisted of a bed, a nightstand, a closet, a bathroom, and a chair next to an empty bookshelf. Releasing her breath in a sigh, Nymira despaired at the size of the space. The room was smaller than all the other quarters she'd ever been allocated. When she had been first officer on her last ship, she'd been given her own apartment. Nymira had never intended to end up on a ship as small as the Echo. She had excelled at every test thrown at her in the academy, had served to the best of her ability, and had ranked up quickly. I guess this is what happens when you're the youngest officer to ever be promoted captain. She rolled her eyes and grumbled. I guess I'll just have to earn the trust of the stupid old men running the goddamn patriarchy. She went to the small bathroom and observed her uniform. Seeing the captain's insignia embroidered on the left side of her chest was still strange. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. Nymira changed out of her uniform and laid down. Her next scheduled meeting with Commander Huron was in 6 hours. She sighed. Her eyes felt heavy as she laid down, got comfortable, and drifted to sleep. Several hours later, Nymira woke to the sound of her alarm, groaning loudly while rolling over and placing her feet on the ground, stretching her sore muscles as she made her way to the bathroom, where she donned her uniform. Nymira paused as she exited, double-checking that her unruly red hair was appropriately pinned down. She applied a small amount of mascara to her very light-colored eyelashes. She made eye contact in the mirror. One of her eyes was green, the other was blue. She rather liked the combination if she was being honest with herself. It made her look fierce and mysterious. The following 2 months of their 7-month journey passed without incident as they continued toward the nebula and fixed the damage from their encounter with the Phaean. They stopped and completed various rogue planet surveys while carefully avoiding any Phaean patrols. Nymira arrived at the bridge of the starship Echo. She had barely sat down when Commander Huron spoke. "Captain, I am picking up a bizarre signal." She looked up from her console, her large green eyes connecting with Nymira's in anticipation of the captain's response. Nymira looked away. The Lunan's diamond-shaped pupils always threw her off. "What type of signal?" Curiosity caressed her voice as she adjusted slightly in her chair. The commander looked back at her console. "It's hard to say. It's not an SOS, it just says, 'We are here.'" She pressed a few different buttons as her eyes scanned the various screens in front of her. "Weird," Nymira murmured. "Ensign Johnson, can you get me a visual?" He nodded and maneuvered the ship so they could try to see what object the signal was coming from. Once the image became clear enough, Nymira was able to make out a small ship with writing on the side. "Please maneuver us toward it with caution," Nymira ordered, in awe of what she was looking at. It seemed so small compared to its surroundings. As they moved closer, Nymira was able to make out the words, "Starship Explorer." Her jaw dropped. "No fucking way," she whispered to herself. How the hell did this ship have Earth English on it? And with an American flag? America hadn't officially been a country since 2150-ish? Nymira thought to herself, her mouth hanging open in surprise. As far as she knew, only a few recorded ships had been sent out with faster-than-light engines before warp had been invented. All those ships had returned safely, and none of them had ever traveled this direction. There was a stunned stillness on the bridge as they drifted closer. Silence, Nymira realized she needed to fill with orders. "Is there a breathable atmosphere inside the ship?" she asked Lieutenant Alexander, who was the current science officer on board. He answered, "No, but there is minimal power. Since there's an American flag on the side, I must assume this ship is at least 400 to 500 years old. I'm surprised there's any power at all." "Even so, let's attempt to contact them. Send them a request to board." He complied by selecting several options on his console before stating, "Request sent, ma'am." The seconds ticked by as they waited for a reply from the mysterious craft in front of them. After what seemed an eternity, the lieutenant finally updated her with, "There is no reply, ma'am." Nymira thought for a second, processing the information she had. "All right, here's what we're going to do. I need someone well-versed in old Earth technology and 2 security officers to accompany me for boarding." She looked at Commander Huron. "I'll need you in the captain's chair while I'm gone." The Lunan nodded. Silence reigned for a second when a soft voice said, "I built an old Earth ship from scratch for our engineering project for graduation. It left the atmosphere without falling apart." A few seconds passed, and the light blue-skinned Kazinian added, my team won first place." Nymira clapped her hands together, spotting the tall, slender being. Her light blue braids, adorned with beads, moved in time with her graceful movements. "Ah, you must be our new ensign. And you are?" "Ensign Constantinople," she replied. Nymira raised an eyebrow. The ensign quickly jumped into an explanation. "My mother first heard of the city when she visited a museum on Earth as a child, and became slightly obsessed. Apparently, it was tough to convince my father and my Mapu. As you can see, she ended up having the final say." Constantinople continued her explanation with a smile. "Most people call me Tinny, since my people don't have last names. Ensign Constantinople or English Tinny is fine. Whichever you prefer." At this explanation, Nymira smiled. Khazinians were known for their love of other planets. The ensign's blue skin was typical for her species, as their skin tones were primary colors and varied from red to blue to yellow. Their planet's atmosphere filtered light differently, and those colors evolved to help protect them from the dangerous predators that hunted them. Protect them. As for the ensign's third parent, her Mapu, it was common knowledge that the Khazinians had 3 genders. Smiling back at the young ensign, Nymira nodded. "I think Ensign Tinny will be just fine." She motioned for the ensign to follow her, and they left the bridge together. As Ensign Tinny and Captain Nymira made their way down to the ship bay, Lieutenant Commander Zanasa Emet, Chief of Security, and a Lunan, joined them. Her light-colored hair was slightly drawn back into a professional bun, emphasizing her typically large Lunan eyes. Her immaculate uniform only reinforced her stern expression, giving the impression that she meant business. "Captain, the shuttle is prepared. Lieutenant Cameron and I will accompany you aboard." The Lunan motioned to a tall human standing to her left. He was as tall as Ensign Tinny. When they arrived at the shuttle bay, a small craft was prepared and ready for flight. It couldn't go very far, but it could enter and exit a planet's atmosphere multiple times before it needed to be recharged. Before they could board, spacesuits would need to be adorned, and all did so with haste. As Nymira snapped her helmet into place, she observed her crewmates. She was satisfied with the people accompanying her on this mission. All seemed level-headed and intelligent, even the stereotypical-looking Lieutenant Cameron. They boarded the shuttle with Nymira and Lieutenant Cameron sitting in the back 2 chairs, as Ensign Tinny and Lieutenant Commander Emet sitting in front to navigate the shuttle to its destination. They exited the bay doors, and the 4 of them faced the vacuum of space together. All aboard the shuttle wondered what they would discover on the Starship Explorer. About 15 minutes later, they were fully docked and ready to board the Explorer. All ensured their spacesuits were secure before opening the shuttle doors. Nymira was the first to enter the ship. From their scans, they were able to detect 3 decks. The bottom level was where engineering department was located. The FTL engine and the other parts took up almost every inch of the allotted space. They all marveled at the impressive display of old technology surrounding them. Small flashing lights flickered on various consoles. "Ensign Tinny, please see if it's at all possible to restore power. Lieutenant Commander Emet, stay with her. Lieutenant Cameron and I will explore the upper decks. Radio if you discover anything," Nymira ordered. They nodded, affirming her orders, and got to work. Nymira and Lieutenant Cameron headed to the exit. Luckily, most old spacecraft had stairs instead of elevators to prevent people from getting stuck on a specific floor if there was a power outage. Nymira directed herself and her companion to the nearest stairs and started their ascent. The next level contained the living quarters, a small recreation area, communal showers, and a cafeteria. The main deck would have the bridge, the captain's quarters, and the cryopods where the crew members slept during FTL jumps. It made the most sense to Nymira to go to the bridge first. If Ensign Tinny could get minimal power restored, they could look at the ship's logs to see what had been recorded in the crew's last days. They quickly made it to the second deck, and it took them about 10 minutes to locate the stairs they thought would take them to the bridge. Together, they resisted the urge to open any doors to any quarters, as it felt like a breach of privacy. Even if the occupants had gone for around 500 years, exploring their things didn't feel right. Besides, they needed to find out why the ship had been drifting in the first place. As she and Lieutenant Cameron made it up the very last stair and rounded a corner, Nymira noticed a blue glow. She slowed, and behind her, so did her companion. She froze at the scene in front of her. "Captain, I think I've found something you need to see," Ensign Tinney radioed over. Disbelief was audible in her voice. Nymira already knew what Ensign Tinney would say because, right before her, was a fully functioning cryopod with a human still alive on the inside.